Welcome to the theory notes for SITHKOP010 plan and cost recipes. I'm Chef Christian coming to you with some information today. I don't have my chef uniform on today, but I do have my Nike Croissant t-shirt on, which is pretty cool. I'm on holidays, so this is a relaxed day, but I've still got uh, my my food brain engaged. Um, I quite enjoy this subject, plan and cost recipes. The reason I enjoy it is because it's fundamental. Okay, so everything else aside, and what I mean by that is, we can learn how to make good food. We can learn how to be scientists. We can learn how to focus on food safety. We can learn how to focus on WHS, how to work with people, how to manage people, all these, how to lead people, all these fundamentals that are required in day-to-day operations. But if we don't know how to manage our costs, none of the rest of that matters. Okay, because that's simply why the owner of the business is there. That's simply why all the staff are there. Everyone's there to make money, to survive, right? Making profit might be one thing, making money to live might be another thing, but fundamentally, business needs to make money. Otherwise, customers won't come back, the business won't be open, staff won't get what they need, and so on, right? So it all has a flow on effect when we consider economics. Okay. um this subject is uh not particularly about menus as such. There is information in there about menus, but we're not learning about um, essentially about planning menus. It's more about recipes. Okay. Now, if the subject was just cost recipes, that would probably be a whole lot easier. But the planning part is where a lot of this comes down to. Okay. And so there are fundamental information that needs to be considered when we plan recipes. Okay. And why we plan recipes. Okay. And so that's what this runs through. And then later on, we run through um, recipe cards, essentially. Okay, cool. So, um, we're talking about organizational information and customer profiling, and profiling is important, obviously, because we need to know who our customers are and what they like, or I guess who our customers are, so that we can target our um, recipes towards them. Right? Organizational information generally means internal documents or information. Okay. So if we're talking about um, sourcing information on our current customer profiles, we can use databases, we can get the marketing department to give us information. We can use internal reports that are based on observations from on customers, um, by employees, anecdotal reporting and feedback, right? Analysis of reservation information, analysis of food sales to identify food preferences. Okay. I used to work at a place, and they had a digital POS system, and we used to get the bookings given to us at the beginning of each service, and that was fantastic. But the wait staff or front of house staff were charged with collecting information on people each day, each shift, right? So, and so you would see notes about customers that were printed out on the run on the daily what was it called, reservation sheet. And it would say things like, any dietary information, but it also used to point towards things that they liked. They liked sitting in this particular seat. They liked this particular wine, or this grape, or this, this sort of thing. And so that's what we're talking about by internal reports. Bit more on organizational information. Um, and what do we mean by the food service style? Now, service style could mean anything from cafeteria style to buffet style to um, table service, one-way table service, two-way table service. There's a variety of service styles, Garrison trolleys, Yum Cha style, lots of different things. So how do we know this? We can tell by the standard recipes that we use. We can tell by the menus that we use. We can tell by advertising materials, discussions with kitchen and service staff, or just observations of the dining room. Okay, service styles. Service styles is important when we're thinking about recipes, and creating new recipes, building menus, that sort of thing, because there's no point. Sorry, I go back. Different menu styles have different uh, um, um, dishes, right? Yum cha, for example, you're gonna have you're gonna need to build small plates that go into dumpling baskets. Or if it's something new that you want to try, then you need to think about the ability of the service staff to be able to produce that. If it's a la carte, you've got to think about the serviceware. You've got to think about the ability of the wait staff to be able to serve it quickly. How quickly we can put it on the plate, get it up under the lights. Um, Lots of different reasons why we need to consider service style. Okay, we need to consider how it's going to be made, how it's going to be get to the customer, and how the customer's going to eat it. Okay. Bit more on organizational information, and the cost of supply of ingredients. Right. So, um, you know, where do we find that information? Right. It might be on purchase order guides, or something similar provided by suppliers. It might be the website of suppliers or online ordering system. It might be invoices, right? So invoices or receipts. So generally, when you purchase things, you get on credit, you get an invoice, and then you have to pay it, and that becomes a receipt. Um, might be quotations received from suppliers. Might be standard recipe cards that include costing. It might be phone calls to suppliers, or from sales order reps, or possibly even speaking to an internal purchasing officer. Moving straight along, we get straight into formulas now. Okay. And that one down the bottom there is budgeted sales, right? So sales budget equals sales volume in units times the selling price per unit, right? So if we're talking about a budget, we might turn around and I'll give you an example. I am heading off to the market soon, um, and I'm going to be looking at the things that I produce, and I'm probably going to be doing, maybe 20 of everything. And so I consider that, and I might already know that that's the amount that I think I'm going to sell. Um, 20 French vanilla custard tarts at $8 a portion is $160. That's my sales budget. Okay. Lots of other formulas there, and where you can see the cooking loss test or actual yield test. okay, is the one that's above, and the formula for that is the edible portion weight minus cooked weight divided by portion weight, right? So you can see an explanation of the things above that. Trimmed weight is the weight of the roast that is placed in the oven. This is called the edible portion weight. After cooking for 2.5 hours, the roast is weighed, and this measurement is called the cooked weight, right? So the edible portion weight, um, might be a kilo, right? And the cooked weight might be 800 grams, right? Divided by the portion weight. Okay, gives us the actual yield test. Butcher's test is a little bit different. It's purchase weight minus trimmed weight equals edible portion weight. Okay, and then basic markup procedure. Cost price of food times 4. This is to achieve a 25% food cost. 25% food cost, I would say, is about the uh, is something that most operators or yeah, business operators would be looking for. Okay. Anything under that, awesome. Anything between 25 and 30 is probably where we're going to sit. But 30% would be the highest. Cool. A little bit on GST there as well. We'll come up to that GST next. So you've got information here on standard measures. Standard measures are important for consistency, accuracy, and comparing yields. Um, yeah. Okay, so the relevant information there that's important is GST, right? Um, currently GST is 10%. So if you've got a basic understanding of maths, um, you work out your costs, get to your sales price, and then you add 10% on, right? So you've got to understand your costs, and you've got to understand that GST needs to be put on top of that. Okay, we'll run through that a little bit later, but let's say our um, um, something costs us $4 to produce, so 25% food cost would say that and a basic markup procedure would say that we multiply that by 4. 4 times 4 is 16. Right, so 16 would be our sales price. We want to put GST on top of that. 10% of 16 is $1.60. That means it's $17.60 menu price. Right, and we round up or down. Okay, generally you probably round up, depending on what it is. Okay, if it's $17.05, you're gonna round it down to $17. You're not gonna round it up to $18 or $17.50. Okay, and obviously the reverse of that is if you've got $15, if you've got $17.60 is your menu price, that equals 110, right, or 1.1, so 110%, which means you've got to take 10% off that. You just divide it by 11. Okay, cool. Cost of deer, yeah. So a little bit about menus now. A la carte menu. So, yeah, there's a bit of a blurb there. It means from the card or at the card. Um, Guests, customers, they order what they want. You only pay for what you order. Everything's individually priced, and essentially that's pretty much the difference. Is that and what defines an a la carte menu is that everything's individually priced. Which means everything's cooked to order. Okay. Table d'hôte or set menu um, generally means it can mean anything from two course, three course, or four course menu. Um, You may or may not have choices, right? But you pay one price for that menu, right? Sometimes you pay a price for a two course, sometimes you pay a price for a three course, but it's an all-inclusive price. Okay. This is usually function menus, similar to this. But function menus are set menus. They can be different rules based on it. But if you think about a wedding, for example, that would be a set menu, right? When I used to operate my wedding catering business, um, I think I think we had $100 a head package, $120 a head package, or $150 a head package, and um, the $100 package was two courses and cake. The $120 menu was two courses plus one dessert and then cake. And then $150 was two courses, so three courses, one dessert, no choice, or maybe it was choices, and a lolly buffet, I think. But anyway, sort of that's the idea of special group function menus. Buffet menus are, if you've never been for a buffet, breakfast buffet is amazing. I love breakfast buffets. I think just the options, right? So many options. You can start off with some fruit, you can get yourself coffee, you can have a juice, you can um, have a pastry, sit down and eat that, and then you can move on to proteins and eggs and bacon and generally little chipolata sausages. Yeah, love it. Um, it's essentially food laid out. You pay one price and you can eat whatever you want. Is the typical this is the typical idea of a buffet menu. Um, Shared plates on a table might be table buffet. Um, but yeah, so there are sort of variations of a lot of some of these menus. Um, and a couple more menus to go. We've got a cycle menu. Um, they're common in hospitals, prisons, boarding schools. Generally, you don't see prices on cycle menus. Depends what it's going to be, um, with the establishment. The reason I say you don't see prices is generally because the price is built into, um, you know, the stay. When I say that, I'm thinking about a boarding school, for example. There's not going to be prices there because the food is just up for the students to come and collect and they grab it. They're not paying, it's part of their tuition fees. Um, Hospitals, same thing. You don't see a price, you just get given 3 meals a day. Prisons, same thing. It's just work on a cycle menu. This gets produced on day one of week one. Um, and every other day within the cycle is different, and then it returns to that one. I've worked in two different establishments with cycle menus, or three. I worked for an agency once, only ever once. I went to a nursing home, um, and I was given a cycle menu, but I had to make texture modified meals, and that was soul destroying for me. So I've never been back. I worked at I ran an Italian chain of Italian restaurants in London called Carluccio's. And we used to have a cycle menu of specials. And so we had a specials list. We were not allowed to do our own food. We had to uh, produce these items that were the specials, and it was a can't remember. I think it was maybe an 8 week cycle. Um, uh, yeah, we'd have an entree special, a pasta special, and a dessert special, and it would just change weekly. Um, yeah, cycle menus could be in breakfast, lunch, and dinner. That's a good point. Degustation menus. Okay, it's a tasting menu. right? Defined by small items. You know, I think I recently, or a couple of years ago, I went to Key for my birthday, Key in Sydney, and that was a 10-course degustation. Um, Now, everyone might go, oh, 10 plates of food, but it's a small plate of food, so that you get to try lots of different things. Yeah, it's awesome. Thoroughly enjoyed the food. Some places they have a la carte menus and degustation menus. So, it might be called something else. It might be called a chef's tasting menu, right? Um, yeah, pretty good idea. Pretty challenging concept for a kitchen as well, especially if you're doing multiple menu styles. Couple of other menus there that are, sort of definitions. You've got the breakfast menu, which, is purely for breakfast. Might be a la carte, might be table d'hote, might be buffet. Dessert menu, yeah. And the reason I put this one in there is because sometimes you find it attached to the a la carte menu, or attached to the a la carte menu. Sometimes it's separate as it gets presented, based on whether you think people are going to have a dessert or not. And the last one I've got in there is a du jour menu. Um, it's a specials menu, essentially. Menu of the day. Yeah, so it might be. And some restaurants, they only have a menu du jour, where they just put on what they have for the day. So, yeah, interesting concept. So moving right along, we're into bit more about customer preferences or profiling, and how we define or figure out what we're going to serve. Contemporary and classical are the two terms that we talk about. Contemporary means, sort of what do people want to eat right now? In this point in time, how are people eating and what do they want to eat? Over recent times, we've seen the rise of eat at home and prepared foods. Certainly, health conscious is more prominent in society. There's plant-based foods, low carbon footprint foods. Certainly, people are going more for breakfast and lunch, right, rather than dinners, um, and certainly smaller meals. Um, the ethnicity of our um, demographic shows that culture plays a role in our food options. Certainly in Australia, uh, we have quite a diverse culture that we have a pretty thorough understanding of worldwide cuisine, and it's you know, so it's quite acceptable and um, regular to see um, concepts from different cultures. Dietary requirements. I'm sure anyone that's reading this information has had something to do with dietary requirements. Food allergies, food intolerances, vegetarians, vegans, pregnancy, religious requirements. It's everywhere. Uh, and if you're not aware of it and don't pay attention to it, you just don't get customers coming back. Um, oh, okay. So location. What does location? How does location have an effect on us? Um, it can play a role in, just the availability of what we can get. If we're in the middle of Australia at Ayers Rock, is seafood likely to be fresh? Probably not. Some people still want it because that's all they want to eat. But it certainly has an effect on the price, right? Seasonality has an effect on the price. Certainly, you find that what's available and what have we got that we have a lot of is going to be at a reduced price. Okay, um, so um, yeah, I'll come back to seasonality in a little bit, but if we talk about the variety of food products, how do we know what we should be um, um, when we're planning a menu? How do we identify what the food preferences are? Sort of similar to a question from before, but we could specials is always like the menu du jour is always a good option for trialing foods before we put them on the menu. We might draw up a menu and present it to guests and staff to get feedback. And certainly speaking to customers and guests in general is a good idea to get an understanding of what customers want. Um, all these different points, examples, characteristics of customer groups should be taken into account when planning and costing recipes. The age range of people, the buying power, the gender, the income level, the social and cultural background. Whether they're families, whether they're young, old, uh, and their gender all play a role in how people purchase things. Here we go. Coming back to seasonality. Seasonality has an effect on food because what's in abundance is cheaper. That's what I was saying before, right? Um, you know, the other thing is people see it at the shops. And so, for example, right now, it's the middle of winter. Persimmons are in season. There's apples everywhere. There's still some berries around. I don't know if they're at their best, but there's an abundance of strawberries. Blackberries are still there around, but it if you've got persimmons and you can put persimmons on your menu, then people recognize that you have a focus on seasonality and you have a focus on food, and that also intrigues them enough to want to come back and see what you're doing next season. Okay. And fundamentally, that's what we should always be focusing on is how do we get our customers to return? Okay. Summer means, lots of different things. Winter means lots of different things. Um, you know, colder foods or fresher foods, less cooked foods, cleaner, healthier in summer. Winter, it's more about, filling you up and warming you up, right? Larger portion size, hot desserts. Um, yeah, so that should be how we look at our menus or developing menus. Okay. Little bit on menu engineering. Okay. Um, I guess we should always be planning to reflect the change of season. We should always be including menu items because customers know it's in season. But this is something that management expects from us. When we are engineering or checking through our customer preferences, we can run through these points here. A POS system will tell you what's popular. What sells and what doesn't sell will tell you what's popular. Seeing what foods come back regularly on customers' plates, that will tell you, what's popular. Speaking to guests, guests, um, will help you to understand what's popular. And let me tell you, customers love chefs. Okay. Um, this little matrix is in here. It's a Casavano and Smith matrix, profitability versus popularity. These sort of four areas, and depending on whether something is low profitability, low popularity, we say that's a dog. If it's low popularity but it's high profitability, it's a puzzle. If it's high profitability and high popularity, and it's a star. If it's high popularity but low profitability, then it's a plough horse, right? And later on in one of my videos, I talk a little bit about that. But we use this when we're looking to change menus, because that's how, when we identify dishes on our menu, we would say, right, well, this one's a star, this one's a plough horse, this is a dog, this is a puzzle, and then keep and change things based on where they are on this matrix. Okay. Um, Standard conventions for naming cuisines, right? It might be named after the cuisine, right? The Baronia Thai restaurant. It might be named after the cooking method, or the Outback Steakhouse. Yeah, you know what's going to be there. Or maybe it's going to be named after the focus of the cuisine, right? Vegetarian, vegan, kosher, fusion, halal. Some couple of different formats that menus can take here, right? You might just have an online menu if you're just ordering online. Maybe we've got blackboards, maybe we've got electronic boards. We used to have a TV that we had up on the wall, and it would scroll through our specials and our special nights, and it was great because it would have photos, and it would just keep scrolling. Maybe we've got placemats. Yeah, placemats are pretty good because you can wipe them down, you can leave them on the table. Maybe it's a paper or card, something similar to what's in the photo there. Okay. Maybe it's a static board. Yeah, so another place that I worked that I used to own and operate, we used to have a big black chalkboard, and everything was up on the chalkboard. Trouble with that was anytime we wanted to change the menu, um, we had to come and get it repainted, which, yeah, it wasn't a particularly a problem. We would change our menu. I think we used to change our menu 3 times a year. Um, but that was just a pub catering. So, yeah, anyway, the blackboard I enjoyed. And then the TV we used to have as specials. Last little bit here that talks about what should be included in a menu, right? Should have the name of the venue, the dining area. We should have available courses. We should have individual menu items by course, dish descriptions, price, special of the day suggestions, maybe any of those points. Um, yeah, so that should give you a good insight into this subject, planning course recipes. There's a few projects now for you to complete. And if you've watched this video, which is the way the scaffold of learning works, is you should be watching this to get a good understanding then of how you approach the other tasks. Okay, thanks for watching. This is Chef Christian. See you next time.